Dear viewers, welcome to Deep Sight. Before we continue our journey through European civilization, I would like to first clarify the differences between Europe's ethnic groups and languages, so that you can more clearly understand the forces behind the formation of today's European nations. To understand the Indo-European language family, we must first return to a more fundamental question. Where does language come from? What is its relationship with human history and what we call race? Do the divergences of race and language happen simultaneously? The answer is far more complex than we imagine. For most of human history, language and tribe were tightly bound together. One tribe spoke one language. There might have been trade or war between tribes, but the boundaries of language were roughly the boundaries of blood and territory. Early hunter-gatherer groups were very small, ranging from a few dozen to a few hundred people. The languages they used were relatively simple, with limited vocabularies and straightforward grammatical structures. These languages spread as tribes migrated, and they diverged as tribes split apart. Regarding changes in Europe's ethnic composition, please refer to our past videos. However, the differentiation of race and language does not proceed in sync. Race, more precisely, the genetic makeup of human groups, changes extremely slowly, on a scale of tens of thousands of years. Language, in contrast, changes much faster. In just a few centuries, it can become unrecognizable. A group can completely change its language through conquest, intermarriage, or cultural assimilation, while retaining its original genetic makeup. Conversely, two different tribes speaking the same language may, after thousands of years of geographical isolation and different marriage partners, develop completely different genetic characteristics. Therefore, what we call the Indo-European language family today is a linguistic classification. It describes the genetic relationships among languages, not a racial concept. The people who speak Indo-European languages mostly belong, in physical terms, to the Europoid, Caucasian, race, but there is enormous internal variation within this race. Moreover, the spread of Indo-European languages is precisely a process of language replacement. The herders of the steppes conquered the indigenous peoples of Europe and imposed their languages on them, but the genes of the conquered largely survived. To understand this process, we need to go back about 12,000 years, to the end of the last ice age. As the ice receded and the climate warmed, human lifestyles began to change fundamentally. In the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, people began to cultivate wheat and barley, and to domesticate goats and sheep. The agricultural revolution had begun. Agriculture brought a sharp increase in population density, settled life, complex social organization, and the large-scale expansion of languages. Farming populations, being larger and faster breeding, spread outward, taking their farming techniques and their languages to new lands. The Basque language of Europe and the Finno-Ugric languages may be relics of pre-agricultural Europe, pushed to the margins by later expanding farming populations. But the expansion of Indo-European took a different path. It was not the slow, pioneering spread of farmers. It accompanied an entirely new technological revolution, the domestication of the horse and the invention of the wheeled vehicle. Sometime between 400 BCE and 3000 BCE, on the Eurasian steppes north of the Black and Caspian Seas, a group of herders developed a highly mobile pastoral economy. They rode horses and drove carts, herding cattle and sheep across the endless grasslands. This way of life gave them unprecedented mobility and military advantage. They could assemble rapidly, strike over long distances, and crush settled farming villages with their swift horses and chariots. Over a few centuries, these steppe herders set out from their homeland in wave after wave, expanding west, east, and south. They were not simply invaders. Their expansion was complex. Sometimes it was a tribal movement of entire families. Sometimes a small elite of warriors conquered local populations and then imposed their language and culture on the conquered. This variety of expansion explains why the spread of Indo-European is often accompanied by a significant genetic input, but the intensity of that input varies greatly from region to region. For example, in Central and Northern Europe, about 75% of the genetic makeup of the corded where people came from the Yamnaya people of the steppe, indicating a large-scale population replacement. The original inhabitants were replaced. In South Asia, however, the genetic contribution from steppe populations is much smaller, roughly 10% to 30%. There, the native populations adopted the conqueror's language but retained their own genes. That is why, in northern India today, people speak Indo-European Hindi but have physical characteristics that differ markedly from Europeans. This is the starting point of the Indo-European story. It is not a grammar book quietly sitting on a library shelf, but an epic written with hooves and wheels, a grand narrative of conquest and fusion, language replacement, and gene flow. Our languages today, English, German, Russian, Greek, Persian, Hindi, are all languages of the descendants of those ancient herders. When we trace the origins of these languages, we are in fact tracing ourselves, where we came from, how we became who we are. Let us now formally enter the world of the Indo-European language family. The discovery of the Indo-European language family was one of the greatest achievements of European linguistics in the late 18th and 19th centuries. Before that, people had only vaguely noticed similarities among certain languages. Renaissance scholars had already seen that Italian, French, and Spanish derived from Latin, and that Latin had some affinity with Greek, but they had not formed a systematic understanding. In 1786, the British Orientalist Sir William Jones delivered a groundbreaking speech to the Asiatic Society in Calcutta. He was fluent in Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, and other classical languages. While studying Sanskrit literature, he was astonished to find that Sanskrit was strikingly similar to Greek and Latin in verb roots and grammatical forms. He wrote in his speech, "The Sanskrit language, whatever be its antiquity, is of a wonderful structure, more perfect than the Greek, more copious than the Latin, and more exquisitely refined than either, yet bearing to both of them a stronger affinity, both in the roots of verbs and in the forms of grammar, than could possibly have been produced by accident, so strong indeed, that no philologer could examine them all three without believing them to have sprung from some common source." Jones's conclusion opened the curtain on Indo-European studies. Over the following century, European scholars systematically compared dozens of languages from Ireland to Bengal, gradually outlining the full picture of this vast language family. The significance of this discovery was no less than that of Columbus's voyage to the New World. It revealed a deep unity hidden beneath superficial differences among languages, providing an entirely new perspective for understanding the history of Europe and indeed all of Eurasia. The German scholar Franz Bopp, in 1816, systematically compared the verb conjugations of Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, Persian, and the Germanic languages, laying the methodological foundation for comparative linguistics. His work, Comparative Grammar of Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, Persian, and Germanic, is regarded as the foundational text of historical comparative linguistics. The Danish scholar Rasmus Rask, in 1818, discovered the pattern of consonant correspondences between Germanic and other Indo-European languages, later known as Grimm's Law. Through rigorous correspondences, he proved that Germanic was not a barbaric deviation from the classical languages, but followed strict phonetic laws. The German scholar Jacob Grimm, in 1822, systematically expounded Grimm's Law, for the first time describing in rule-like form the evolution of Germanic consonants from Proto-Indo-European, thus laying the scientific foundation for historical phonetics. In 1861, the German scholar August Schleicher proposed the family tree theory of language evolution, using a tree diagram to depict the relationships among the branches of Indo-European, introducing the evolutionary ideas of biology into linguistics. By the end of the 19th century, the basic framework of the Indo-European language family had been established. It included more than a dozen branches: Indo-Iranian, Greek, Italic, Celtic, Germanic, Slavic, Baltic, Albanian, Armenian, as well as ancient extinct branches such as Anatolian and Tocharian. The decipherment of Hittite in the early 20th century and of Tocharian in the mid-Tizertage century further extended the temporal and spatial boundaries of the Indo-European family, pushing its historical depth back to the 2nd millennium BCE. As we unfold this linguistic map, the first to catch our eye is the Indo-Iranian branch, the most populous and widely distributed. The Indo-Iranian branch has over 1.5 billion speakers, an undisputed giant within Indo-European. In its Indo-Aryan group, Sanskrit is the oldest representative. The Rig Veda, from around 1500 BCE, is one of the oldest texts in any Indo-European language. Sanskrit is phonetically extremely conservative, preserving the vowel system and the three-way stop contrast of Proto-Indo-European, making it the cornerstone of Indo-European comparative linguistics. Modern descendants include Hindi, Urdu, Bengali, Punjabi, and dozens of other languages, covering most of northern and central India. The sound systems of these modern languages have undergone profound changes: vowel simplification, retroflexion of consonants, and the prominence of voiced aspirates, reflecting long-term contact with Dravidian languages. Romani, Gypsy, also belongs to this group. As the Roma migrated westward into Europe, their language absorbed elements from many languages along the way. The Iranian group includes Old Persian, the official language of the Achaemenid dynasty, and Avestan, the language of the Zoroastrian scriptures. Modern languages include Persian, Farsi, Pashto, Kurdish, Tajik, and Balochi. The Iranian branch experienced large-scale sound changes, the devoicing of voiced aspirates in Proto-Iranian, the change of S to H in certain positions, and vowel simplification. After the Arab conquest, Persian borrowed heavily from Arabic and adopted the Arabic script, but it retained the basic grammatical structure of an Indo-European language. In addition, the extinct Scythian Sarmatian group, used by the nomads of the Black Sea-Caspian steppes, survives only in a few words and inscriptions, but its phonetic features entered Slavic and Turkic languages through loanwords, providing valuable material for historical phonetics. Leaving vast Asia, let us turn to the Mediterranean, the home of the Greek branch. Greek is one of the longest continuously attested languages in the Indo-European family, with written records spanning more than 3,400 years. From Mycenaean Greek in Linear B, 14th century BCE, to Ancient Greek, Homer, Attic literature, to Koine Greek, the Hellenistic period, the New Testament, to Byzantine Greek, and to modern Greek, the lineage is unbroken, never interrupted. The Greek branch underwent dramatic phonetic evolution. The Proto-Indo-European voiced aspirates were devoiced to voiceless aspirates in Ancient Greek, but the systematic contrast of consonants and vowels was preserved. During the Koine period, Itticism occurred, multiple vowels and diphthongs merged into the sound I, fundamentally changing the phonological landscape of Greek. Modern Greek further simplified. Aspirates became fricatives, ph, f, th, theta, kh, x, and the vowel system simplified to 5 vowels. The Greek alphabet, derived from the Phoenician script, is the ancestor of the Latin and Cyrillic alphabets, and its changing sound values record 3 millennia of phonetic evolution. Closely related to the Greek branch is the Italic branch and its descendant, the Romance languages. The Italic branch included several languages in ancient Italy: Latin, Oscan, Umbrian, Faliscan, etc. With the expansion of Rome, Latin became dominant and eventually absorbed the other Italic languages. Latin was phonetically relatively conservative, but early on it underwent several important changes. Proto-Indo-European voiced aspirates became fricatives or voiceless stops in Latin, and the length distinction in vowels became an important grammatical marker. After the collapse of the Roman Empire, Latin evolved into regional Vulgar Latin varieties, which then diversified into the Romance language family. This diversification was closely tied to historical events. Different regions were invaded by different groups, Germanic, Arabic, etc., creating distinct phonetic trajectories. Iberian Romance, Spanish, Portuguese, Catalan, Galician, underwent vowel simplification, consonant lenition, and fricativization. In Spanish, Latin initial F became H and then was lost, hablar, fabulari, recording the traces of Visigothic and Arab rule. In Gaul, French underwent the most dramatic changes: vowel system complexification, massive consonant loss, reflecting the influence of Frankish Germanic and the underlying Gaulish language. On the Italian peninsula, Sardinian is the most conservative Romance language, preserving the Latin vowel system. Italian, based on the Florentine dialect, underwent vowel reduction and consonant reinforcement. In the Balkans, Romanian, surrounded by Slavic languages, phonetically absorbed Slavic palatalization and vowel features, while retaining several conservative features of Latin. Latin itself continued in religion, scholarship, and law into modern times, one of the most important cultural carriers of Western civilization. On the western edge of Europe, the Celtic branch tells another story. The Celts were once among the most widespread peoples in Europe, from Ireland to Asia Minor. The most distinctive phonetic feature of the Celtic branch is the change of Proto-Indo-European K into P. For example, the word for horse is Latin equus but Celtic epos. This change is known as Celtic P-Celticization and is the most marked phonetic identifier of the Celtic branch. Continental Celtic, Gaulish, Celtiberian, Galatian was replaced by Latin during Romanization, but the phonetic features of Gaulish entered French through loanwords, leaving hundreds of Celtic etymologies. Insular Celtic survives, divided into Goidelic, Irish, Scottish Gaelic, Manx, and Brittonic, Welsh, Breton, Cornish. The Goidelic languages underwent complex vowel changes, palatalization, and an initial consonant mutation system, lenition, reflecting isolated evolution in an island environment. The Brittonic languages also experienced complex consonant mutation systems, though their paths differed. The Celtic branch is one of the most endangered in Indo-European, but it is experiencing a revival in Ireland, Wales, and elsewhere. Now turn your eyes to Northern Europe, the homeland of the Germanic branch. The phonetic evolution of the Germanic branch is one of the most important discoveries in all Indo-European studies. Grimm's Law systematically describes the consonant changes from Proto-Indo-European to Proto-Germanic. PIE voiceless stops became voiceless fricatives. PIE voiced stops became voiceless stops. PIE voiced aspirates became voiced fricatives, which later became voiced stops. This set of changes occurred around the first millennium BCE, during the independent development of Germanic, and is associated with contacts between Germanic tribes and Celtic and Roman peoples. Thereafter, further phonetic differentiation occurred within Germanic. East Germanic Gothic retained the early post-Grimm's Law state and did not undergo the second sound shift. This branch died out with the Vandals and Burgundians during the migration period. In West Germanic, English experienced a conservative Old English period, then was profoundly influenced by Viking invasions and the Norman conquest. Norman French provided about 60% of the loanwords in English vocabulary, yet English retained its Germanic roots and basic grammatical structure. English phonetics underwent the Great Vowel Shift, 1400 to 1700, which completely altered the sound values of the vowel system, a key reason for the difference between English and continental Germanic languages. German underwent the second sound shift, c. 6th to 8th centuries, turning some voiceless stops into fricatives or affricates, p, pff, t, tss, k, kxx, creating the High German, Low German split. This shift occurred in tandem with the expansion of the Frankish kingdom and the Christianization of German lands. North Germanic includes Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, Icelandic, and Faroese. Icelandic, due to its geographical isolation, retains a form closest to Old Norse, making it the most conservative modern Germanic language. North Germanic experienced a series of changes: vowel breaking, monophthongisation, consonant weakening, reflecting the Viking Age expansion and later close contacts with Low German and the Hanseatic League. Moving eastward, we enter the realm of the Balto-Slavic branch. The Balto-Slavic branch covers most of Eastern Europe, Central Europe, and the Balkans, one of the largest branches of Indo-European. It retains many conservative features of PIE phonology, but also underwent unique innovations. The Baltic languages, Lithuanian, Latvian, and the extinct Old Prussian, are among the most conservative in the entire Indo-European family. Lithuanian has preserved the PIE vowel system and accentual system, including the ancient pitch accent. This conservatism is linked to its relatively isolated geographic position and its late Christianization, 14th to 15th centuries. The Slavic branch experienced a major phonetic unification in the 6th to 7th centuries, vowel system restructuring, palatalization becoming a key feature, and the PIE length opposition turning into a quality opposition. When the Slavic apostles Cyril and Methodius created the Glagolitic and Cyrillic alphabets in the 9th century, they recorded precisely this stage of Old Church Slavonic. Slavic then split into three subgroups. In East Slavic, Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, Russian underwent vowel reduction, Akanai, and systematic consonant palatalization, reflecting contact during the Mongol period, 13th to 15th centuries. In West Slavic, Polish, Czech, Slovak, Sorbian, Polish retained nasal vowels, a, e, while Czech underwent vowel length reaccentuation. In South Slavic, Serbian, Croatian, Bosnian, Montenegrin, Slovenian, Bulgarian, Macedonian. Bulgarian and Macedonian were influenced by the Balkan Sprachbund, losing the Slavic case system and developing a post-posed definite article. Slavic uses the Cyrillic alphabet under Orthodox influence or the Latin alphabet under Catholic influence, reflecting the East-West Christian divide. Thank you for watching, dear viewers. That is all for this episode. See you next time.